They say the hardest prison to escape is the one built by your own family. For me, that prison was the Vance name. Let me start with the truth. My father, Senator Clayton Vance, didn't just ignore me in his will. He used his final moment of power to publicly crush me. He left my brothers $43 million and left me a lifetime supply of shame. I thought I knew the meaning of betrayal before that night. But I was wrong. It's a different kind of horror when your own blood looks you in the eye and tells you your sacrifice meant less than nothing. If you've ever been told you're worthless by the people who should have championed you, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is your refuge. We are building a community where integrity triumphs over inheritance. We dive deep into the real stories of family drama and underdog comebacks. Stories where the good guys actually win. Don't miss a single chapter of this reckoning. Now, let's talk about the night everything shattered. The air in the Georgetown mansion was thick with expensive perfume and self-congratulation. It was my father's 70th birthday bash, but it felt more like a political convention designed solely to showcase his wealth and dominance. I was there, the outlier, the one who smelled faintly of cedar and lacquer instead of power and silk. I'm Lachlan Vance, a custom woodworker, a luthier. I make instruments that speak the truth. My family deals in lies. I had tried to blend into the shadow of a marble pillar, hoping to fulfill my family duty without attracting attention. But when my father takes a stage, the light finds everyone. He began his speech with a politician's practiced humility, quickly segueing into the announcement everyone was waiting for, the division of his private wealth and political assets. He started with my older brothers, Graham and Ethan. They were the perfect disciples. Graham, the CEO, standing tall with a predatory stillness, his wife clinging to his arm like an expensive trophy. Ethan, the finance prodigy, whose smile never quite reached his eyes. "To Graham!" my father boomed, his voice resonating perfectly in the cavernous hall. "The primary political endowment, the DC estates, and $25 million in liquid capital. You understand the currency of power." The applause was immediate and deafening. Graham accepted it with a slight, arrogant nod, already calculating his next move. "And to Ethan," he continued, his tone swelling with pride. "The international holdings, the Manhattan penthouse, and another $18 million in unrestricted capital. You have proven ruthlessness is a virtue." Ethan. Another wave of applause washed over them. They stood there, $43 million richer, a unified front of smug entitlement. Then, the mood shifted. My father's eyes, cold, blue, and utterly devoid of warmth, locked onto mine. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, anticipating the final, exquisite moment of cruelty. "And then," he announced, his voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel, "we come to Lachlan, the son who traded his birthright for a hobby, the son who chose to tinker with wood instead of building a dynasty. Lachlan, who abandoned his family to become a common artisan." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy, savoring my humiliation. My stomach twisted into a knot of familiar pain, but I stood my ground. "To you, Lachlan," he declared, raising his crystal glass higher. "I leave precisely what you have contributed to the Vance name. Nothing. Not a penny. Not a property. Not a share. You were never worthy of this family's ambition. And tonight, I confirm that truth for everyone here present." The ensuing applause was a fresh hell. It wasn't just clapping. It was a chorus of affirmation for my failure. I saw my Aunt Meredith, who used to read me stories, turn her head away in pity. I saw my father's business partners laugh openly. A dark, victorious sound. My whole body went numb. It wasn't the loss of the money that broke me. It was the public, absolute rejection of my character. He didn't just exclude me from the will, he excommunicated my soul. As I walked toward the entrance, the sounds of celebration echoing behind me, I heard Graham's parting shot, loud enough for half the room to hear. The money's for the deserving, little brother. Hope you've got a good emergency fund for those wood stains. I was halfway out the door, blinded by the sudden, intense rush of hot, humiliating tears when a hand, old, trembling but firm, grabbed my arm. "Lachlan, wait, please." It was Malcolm Frost, the family's ancient estate lawyer. His eyes were wide with genuine distress, a stark contrast to the predatory glee of everyone else. He glanced frantically over his shoulder, ensuring no one was watching, and pressed a sealed, thick manila envelope into my hand. "You need this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roaring crowd. "She made me swear on my life to give this to you tonight, not a day sooner, not a day later." The envelope bore the familiar, elegant initials of my mother, Eleanor Vance, who had died just 5 years prior after a long, cruel illness. I was frozen, holding the last words of the only person in that entire fortress who had ever shown me unconditional love. I didn't know it yet, but inside that envelope was the evidence of a betrayal so deep, so calculated, it made the $43 million snub look like child's play. It was the truth about my mother's death, and the weapon she had forged for my final war. The shame of that night wasn't a sudden injury. It was the inevitable explosion from a pressure cooker that had been hissing for 30 years. To really get why my father felt so entitled to deny me access to the Vance fortune, why he felt I was never worthy, you gotta rewind. You gotta understand the toxic atmosphere I grew up breathing. My childhood wasn't privileged. It was transactional. The Georgetown mansion wasn't a home. It was the campaign headquarters for the Clayton Vance political operation. Every action, every word, every piece of furniture was vetted for its optics and political advantage. Sentiment was a weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. Graham and Ethan, my older brothers, were born understanding the game. They were the golden boys, the heirs apparent. Graham, 6 years older, was the meticulous planner, always in a pressed shirt, already talking about mergers and acquisitions by the time he was a teenager. He didn't play baseball, he practiced negotiating. Ethan, 3 years my senior, was the financial predator, chasing the highest yield, always calculating leverage. They were cold, ambitious, and they made Dad proud. They were mirror images of his hunger. And then there was me. I was the anomaly. While they were studying SEC filings, I was in the small, dusty carriage house behind the main estate, obsessed with the smell of sawdust and the feel of raw wood. I found a piece of myself in the meticulous, honest work of building things, of crafting an instrument where every cut, every curve, had to be perfect to achieve a resonant sound. I learned early that wood doesn't lie. It either sings or it breaks. I loved that truth. My mother, Eleanor, was the only one who didn't try to reshape me. She was the family's public face of compassion, the tireless advocate for community health initiatives through the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation. But behind the perfect veneer, she was deeply unhappy, isolated by my father's emotional neglect. She saw my quiet obsession as a sanctuary. She gave me my first expensive set of carving tools and always told me, "Lachlan, find the music in the material. That's your truth." She was my anchor. The rift truly began after high school. I got accepted into the prestigious North Bennett Street School for Artisan Training, my ticket to a life of honest work. Dad had already lined up a spot for me at Georgetown Law. "You will not disgrace this family by becoming a mere tradesman," he barked, throwing my acceptance letter across his study. "You will be a senator, a power broker. You will create value, not knickknacks." That's when I finally pushed back. I moved out, got a tiny plot of land outside Charlottesville, and built my first proper workshop. It was small, dusty, and completely mine. It was the first time I felt truly free, but that freedom was short-lived. 5 years ago, Mom was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive neurological disorder. It was a crushing blow. The disease was insidious, requiring specialized, round-the-clock care. Graham was in the middle of a hostile takeover. Ethan was launching his new fund on Wall Street. Their commitment was strictly checkbook deep. They sent increasingly expensive arrangements and brief, empty texts. My choice was instantaneous, instinctive. I packed up my meager life, put my burgeoning luthier business on hold, and moved back into the Georgetown Ice Palace. I threw myself into her care. I became her full-time caregiver, her advocate, her nurse, her researcher. While my brothers were negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, I was arguing with insurance companies, administering complex medication schedules, and meticulously tracking her symptoms. I learned more about neuroscience and palliative care than I ever did about balance sheets. My father's gratitude, condescension, masked as generosity. "I'm paying you a retainer to manage the situation, Lachlan," he told me, never once meeting my eyes. "This isn't a sacrifice. It's a stipend. You're merely coordinating the logistics. It's disappointing you wasted your talent on this when a certified nurse could do the same." The stipend was just enough to ensure I remained financially dependent, unable to restart my luthier career, keeping me trapped. My love for Mom was my only real payment. Graham and Ethan constantly undermined me. When I missed Graham's engagement dinner because Mom had a severe, unexpected episode, he didn't call. He had his assistant text me. "Family duty demands professionalism. Hire more staff next time. Don't compromise the brand. Ethan." Visiting briefly to finalize a real estate deal, wandered into my old workshop area. He picked up one of my finished violins, a piece I'd put 6 months of my soul into. He scoffed, tossing it carelessly onto a workbench. "Bassoons and banjos?" he sneered. "This is DC, Lachlan. We deal in power, you deal in puzzles." I absorbed it. I took their venom because every minute I spent with Mom was a minute stolen from the political operation. She was fading, but she was still my mother, and my sole purpose was her comfort. I was the one fighting to keep a window open, while they were busy sealing the house airtight. It's a specific kind of agony, dedicating yourself entirely to someone you love, only to have your efforts dismissed as the work of an amateur. If you've ever poured your heart out only to be told you're redundant, comment unseen below. We carry that same scar. I was the emotional caretaker, the one managing the pain and the doubt. But even as I dedicated my life to her, the fear was growing. Mom was deteriorating too fast. We were following the protocol set by the family's exclusive physician, Dr. Elias Thorne, a respected name and close friend of my father, yet she only seemed to be getting worse. I had this nagging, icy suspicion, but I silenced it. Who was I? The failed artisan? To question a medical genius and a powerful senator? That doubt, that suppressed instinct, would soon become the evidence I desperately needed. The disease didn't just consume Mom, it consumed my life, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. My sacrifice wasn't just my career, it was my sanity, constantly fighting a battle with a disease and a family that seemed determined to lose. My hands, once precise and sensitive to the subtle vibrations of spruce, were now rough from lifting, turning, and administering care. I was the full-time warden of her misery. My suspicion about Dr. Elias Thorne began to curdle into cold fear. He was the head of a private medical group, a pillar of the DC health community, and a personal friend of my father. His treatment protocol for Mom's rare neurological disorder was rigid and proprietary. And frankly, it wasn't working. Mom was deteriorating far too quickly, experiencing strange side effects, extreme fatigue, inexplicable nerve pain that didn't match the established prognosis for her condition. I'd spend hours late at night, in the quiet solitude of the mansion's library, reading medical journals and cross-referencing her charts. Every intuition I had, every piece of independent research I found, screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with the medication cocktail Elias Thorne insisted upon. His regime was overly complex, involving constant adjustments and specialized compounds only available through his own clinic. It felt less like healing and more like isolation and control. Mom noticed it too. Though weakened, her mind was still sharp. She'd ask cryptic questions. "Lachlan, why does the senator insist on Dr. Elias Thorne's proprietary blend? Why can't I see an outside specialist? They're keeping me confined." She used the senator, never Clayton. When talking about his decisions regarding her care, it was the language of politics, not marriage. When I tried to raise these concerns, the reaction from my father was immediate and suffocating. "Dr. Elias Thorne is the authority. You are questioning his expertise based on some online paper? You are truly wasting your intelligence. Lachlan, you manage the staff. You do not manage the science." Graham and Ethan reinforced this toxic wall. "Stick to the protocol, little brother." Graham would lecture, sounding less like a sibling and more like a compliance officer. "It's fiscally responsible. Your emotional speculation is a liability to the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation's public image." They didn't care about Mom. They cared about the foundation's public rating and their father's reputation. The financial pressure became overwhelming. I knew there were experimental immunotherapy trials, promising, legitimate paths that could slow the progression. But they were prohibitively expensive, and my father flatly refused to fund them. "We are not throwing 6 figures at a long-shot gamble," he declared. I had no choice but to start liquidating my own assets. The small piece of land where my workshop sat was mortgaged. Next went my prized possessions, the rare tools I'd inherited from my luthier grandfather, the carefully aged stocks of ebony and rosewood I'd saved for a custom commission. Each sale was a small death to my career, a step further away from the life I loved. But Mom's comfort came first. I realized then that my father was capable of sacrificing anything, even the physical comfort of his wife, for the sake of his image and his control over the family money. The tension peaked around every holiday. My father would host lavish parties to showcase his devotion. Mom would be medicated, wheeled out for precisely 30 minutes, long enough for the DCC photographers to capture the perfect image of the caring senator and his brave wife. Then she would be hurried back into her isolation. She became a prop in his political performance. During the foundation's annual gala, she was particularly weak. But my father insisted she make an appearance to sign off on a massive allocation of funds, a move I found deeply suspicious. When I questioned him, he dismissed me. "It's just protocol, Lachlan. A routine transfer of capital for a new health initiative. You worry too much." As I adjusted her wheelchair, I watched him adjust his tie in the mirror, his focus solely on the camera lens. Mom, however, was quietly fighting back, unbeknownst to me then. She had already begun reaching out to Malcolm Frost, asking cryptic questions about asset protection and medical confidentiality. She was laying the groundwork for her final, devastating countermove. She even managed to slip me a small, folded note once, hidden inside a book. "Trust your research. Do not trust the prescription." I found the note later, but by then, the relentless schedule and emotional fatigue had blurred my focus. I worried more about keeping her comfortable than investigating a potential conspiracy. I failed to see the danger because I was too close, too exhausted, too burdened by the role of the devoted son. I believed my sacrifice, my total commitment to her care, was my only weapon against their greed. I didn't know it was also my greatest vulnerability, leaving me open to the final, crushing betrayal that was just around the corner. The betrayal that would strip me of the one person I had left. The constant, gnawing fear that I was missing something crucial, that I was failing her despite giving everything, became the heavy internal monologue I carried every single day. The coldness, the refusal to look me in the eye when I talked about her pain, the easy dismissal of thousands of dollars as fiscally responsible. It all pointed toward a deliberate, planned cruelty that went far beyond mere neglect. It was calculated, it was political, and it was aimed directly at the one fragile thing I still held dear. Mom's condition had entered a terrifying new phase. It was right around the time my father was ramping up his final campaign push, the one before his big 70th birthday announcement, that the opportunity and the final crisis hit. I had been tracking a specific experimental immunotherapy trial being conducted in Boston. It was risky, unproven by the DC establishment. But the latest data showed a small, real chance of slowing the neurological damage. It was her last, best hope. The one thing Dr. Elias Thorne conveniently refused to mention. I knew my research was sound. I knew this was the ethical choice, the humane choice, but the initial deposit alone for the trial just to get her enrolled was $150,000. I had nothing left. I had mortgaged my workshop, sold off all my antique wood stocks, and my personal savings were gone. I was running on fumes and stubborn love, swallowing the last of my pride. I went to my father's campaign office. It was the only place where the money actually flowed. He was sitting behind his enormous desk, a desk I now realize was probably built with stolen money, looking like a statue of power. I placed the clinical trial documents in front of him, my hands shaking only slightly. "Dad," I pleaded, my voice tight. "This is it. This trial could buy us another year, maybe more. It's validated. I just need the initial deposit. Please, use some of the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation funds. That's what Mom would want." He didn't even pick up the file. He just stared at the polished mahogany surface of his desk, his expression utterly blank, devoid of any paternal connection. "Lachlan," he sighed, pushing the papers away as if they were contaminated garbage. "You are disrupting a critical fundraising meeting. The foundation operates on strict guidelines. We fund community health initiatives, not speculative, personalized trials. Your mother's comfort is assured through Elias Thorne's care. Stop this emotional drama." I tried one last time, desperation clawing at my throat. "She's your wife, Dad. Isn't her life worth more than the optics of a community clinic? Isn't her chance worth more than a press release?" He finally looked up, and the look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was pure, clinical contempt. "Her life is costly, Lachlan," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "And right now, it's a distraction. The foundation funds are allocated to ensure my legacy. I am not throwing 6 figures at a long-shot gamble that won't even buy us a favorable news cycle. The money is for those who create value. You understand? And you—" He dismissed me with a flick of his hand. "Have never understood value." I left that office with a clear, burning realization. My father was not a neglectful husband. He was an obstacle. He was protecting his reputation and his money with a ruthlessness that defied sanity. But the final, crushing blow came the next day. I approached Graham for a personal loan, the brother who stood to inherit $25 million, begging for a fraction of what he was about to get. He met me at a sterile, high-end club near the Senate, a place where deals were made in hushed tones over expensive whiskey. He didn't offer a drink. He offered termination. A loan. "Lachlan, you're asking for a handout, days before the will reading." "Pathetic," Graham said, his lawyer face perfectly neutral. "Look, Dad's done the math. Mom's situation is permanent. It's time for you to accept reality. We're cutting you off the payroll, effective immediately." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What? You can't? Who will manage her care? Who will track the specialist? You know the schedule. A professional nurse." Graham interrupted, flipping through a crisp new file. "A team. Actually, they're already hired. We're transitioning her care to the Elias Thorne Group's private care unit. Fully contained, fully managed. You're redundant, little brother. The mansion needs to be prepped for the senator's 71st year. He was firing me from my own mother's care. That single action, the professional, callous severance of my only tie to her, was the absolute peak of their cruelty. They didn't just deny her treatment, they denied me the right to be her son. I was stripped of my financial stability and, far worse, My purpose. I stood alone, an empty shell, having sacrificed my career, only to be tossed out like yesterday's trash. The world tilted. I had poured 5 years of my life, my talent, and every single dollar I earned into her. Now, I was locked out, redundant, and penniless, while they celebrated their inherited wealth. I walked out of that club into the afternoon heat, completely shattered, thinking they've won. They've not only taken my past and my future, but they've taken my ability to fight for the one person who ever truly loved me. I didn't know that the public humiliation at the 70th birthday party was deliberately timed to coincide with my forced isolation. I didn't know that my mother, Eleanor, had seen this moment coming for years. They thought they had defeated me by cutting me off, but what they had done was sever the last tie that held me back from the truth. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. The rejection from Graham wasn't the final defeat. It was the starting gun. I left that sterile club, my entire world in free fall, and drove straight to my workshop, not to work, but to face the final, undeniable truth. I sat on a dusty workbench, the smell of burnt electrical tape and old lacquer oddly comforting. My hands, the hands that could shape a piece of raw maple into a Stradivarius copy, were shaking uncontrollably as I finally broke the seal on Mom's envelope. The wax cracked under my thumb. The first line hit me like a physical blow. "Lachlan, if you're reading this, the senator has successfully cut you out. And now, you need to know the truth about why my illness progressed the way it did." My mother, Eleanor, confirmed my deepest, darkest suspicion. She hadn't died of natural causes alone. She was murdered, not with a gun or a knife, but with calculated medical abuse. The letter explained that years ago, before her diagnosis, Mom had uncovered massive financial fraud at the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation. My father and his chief medical advisor, Dr. Elias Thorne, were systematically siphoning tens of millions of dollars, money meant for community health, into offshore accounts and campaign slush funds. When Mom got sick, she realized they saw an opportunity. She was a liability. The senator couldn't risk her talking, especially since she was the foundation's public face. The treatment protocol that Dr. Elias Thorne had insisted upon, the one with the complex proprietary compounds, was designed not to heal, but to accelerate her decline. Mom had used her access to the records and her own scientific background to understand the cocktail. It wasn't poison in the classic sense. It was a manipulation of her existing condition, an aggressive, high-risk regime of drugs that were counterindicated for her specific neurological disorder, but perfectly masked as cutting-edge medicine. I dropped the letter. My head swam. My sacrifice, the 5 years I poured into caring for her, was spent unknowingly administering her slow execution. I had been their accomplice. I felt a wave of crushing self-loathing so profound, I nearly blacked out. My devotion hadn't saved her. It had simply made the senator's plan easier. But the letter wasn't just a confession of murder. It was a blueprint for justice. Mom, in her final months, was brilliant. She couldn't fight my father openly without risking immediate retaliation that would silence her and ruin me. So she fought in secret. She methodically documented the dosing changes, the suspicious drug shipments, and the dates of the fraudulent foundation transfers. She explained that the $43 million my brothers were so proud of inheriting wasn't just my father's money. It was the estimated value of the principal fund that she had managed to secretly divert, using a series of obscure financial trusts. Just before the senator completely seized control, it was restitution, not inheritance. The money was a weapon. Tucked into the envelope was a micro USB drive and a thick packet of notarized documents, including a small, handwritten ledger. The first file on the drive was titled, "The Acceleration Protocol." I plugged the drive into my old workshop laptop. My hands were shaking too violently to use the mouse, so I commanded the computer with desperate clicks. The audio file was short, dated 6 months before her death. My father's voice, calm and utterly detached, filled the small space. Elias Thorne, the timeline is unacceptable. Her status as Foundation president is too exposed. I need full control of that capital before the vote next month. Use the revised compound. It must look natural. I don't want questions. Then, Doctor, Elias Thorne's nervous. Clipped reply. Senator, this dosage is medically indefensible. It will drastically shorten the window. It's too aggressive. And my father's final, horrifying instruction. It needs to happen sooner. Do your job. Doctor, ensure my legacy. I sat there, breathing the dust of my failed career, listening to the man who gave me my name casually order the death of the woman who gave me my soul. The shock was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard, righteous fury. My sacrifice hadn't been in vain. It had simply been the required time in the wilderness before I was armed with the truth. Mom's letter ended with a final choice. Lachlan, the money is yours. You can take the $43 million and disappear. Start your life over. Or you can use the evidence I have gathered to destroy the man who stole our life. I trust your heart. I know what you will choose. She knew. She knew the boy who chose to build guitars instead of power structures. The boy who spent 5 years fighting a losing battle out of pure love would choose justice over comfort. I was the keeper of her final masterpiece. The time for grieving was over. The time for reckoning had begun. The cold fury I felt wasn't something I'd ever experienced before. It wasn't the hot, messy rage that fades. It was the cold, surgical resolve of a luthier making a final, perfect cut. The time for grieving was over. Mom's final masterpiece of justice needed to be played. I immediately contacted Malcolm Frost, the lawyer. He answered on the first ring, sounding like he'd been waiting by the phone for 5 years. He didn't ask if I'd read the letter. He just asked what I needed him to do. The moment he heard the audio recording of my father and doctor, Elias Thorne. His voice broke. He confirmed everything, revealing how Mom had painstakingly coached him on setting up the trust and protecting the evidence. He hadn't been an accomplice to the crime. He'd been an unwilling guardian of the truth. Lachlan, he whispered, your mother said you would know the right moment. The senator is untouchable right now. It has to be public. It has to be devastating. We had the evidence for fraud, embezzlement of the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation, and conspiracy to commit medical malpractice leading to death. We needed a stage bigger than his birthday party. We chose the senator's final campaign launch and health initiative press conference. It was scheduled for the grand ballroom of the Willard Hotel, packed with national media, major donors, and, most importantly, the entire D.C. Health Regulatory Board. This wasn't just about money. It was about destroying his legacy of trust. I contacted the lead FBI agent Frost had secretly earmarked, Agent Chavez, a seasoned veteran who had been sniffing around the Vance Foundation's finances for years, but could never prove the link to the senator himself. When she reviewed the audio, the medical reports, and the notarized ledger, her expression was grim. He used his wife's own illness as a shield to steal from the sick, she said, her voice tight with professional disgust. This is it, Lachlan. This is the end of the Vance dynasty. The day of the conference felt surreal. I dressed in the best suit I owned, rented, of course, but beneath the cheap fabric. I felt the cold weight of the micro USB drive in my pocket. I arrived with Agent Chavez and a plainclothes team from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Security tried to stop us, but federal badges open every door in Washington. The ballroom was magnificent, a sea of cameras and self-important faces, many of the same people who had applauded my humiliation weeks earlier. My father was already on stage, flanked by Graham and Ethan, all three of them radiating an utterly false aura of integrity. They were signing documents, smiling for the cameras, talking about dedication to public health. I walked down the center aisle. My steps were steady, but the earthquake was in my chest. My father saw me first. His practiced politician's smile faltered, replaced by a momentary flash of annoyance, quickly transitioning to rage. "What the hell is he doing here?" Graham hissed into the microphone, his voice cutting across the quiet applause. I climbed the steps to the stage, stopping just feet from my father. Agent Chavez positioned herself behind me. The entire room went silent, recognizing the moment was no longer about policy. "Before you finalize these transfers, Dad," I said, my voice strong, cutting through the tense silence. "The DC, public and your loyal donors deserve to know exactly what kind of health initiative the Vance family truly represents." My father started to recover his composure, his political reflexes kicking in. "Lachlan, you pathetic distraction. This is not the time for your emotional theatrics." "No, Dad," I replied, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the venue's massive sound system. "This is the time for truth." I hit play, the ballroom filled with my father's calm, detached voice, discussing my mother's poisoning with Dr. Elias Thorne. "The timeline is unacceptable. Use the revised compound. It must look natural. It needs to happen sooner. Do your job, Doctor. Ensure my legacy." The gasps were audible. Donors grabbed their phones. Reporters surged forward, their camera shutters clicking like rapid-fire guns. My father's face was frozen, stripped bare of all his practiced charm. Just naked guilt and fear. Agent Chavez stepped forward, her badge held high. "Senator Clayton Vance, you are under arrest for massive fraud, embezzlement of the Eleanor Vance Charitable Foundation, and conspiracy to commit aggravated medical abuse leading to the death of Eleanor Vance." Federal agents moved in. My father looked at Graham and Ethan, who were standing there, pale and paralyzed. The $43 million legacy was crumbling around them in real time. He then looked at me. Pure, concentrated hatred burning in his eyes. "You destroyed everything," he snarled as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. "No," I said, my voice steady, feeling the cold, hard satisfaction of 5 years of agony finally finding release. "You destroyed everything when you stole Mom's life. I just completed the instrument of justice she built." As the FBI led him away, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Graham and Ethan rushed forward, their expensive suits suddenly looking cheap and desperate. "Lachlan, do you realize what you've done?" Graham grabbed my arm. "The foundation, the capital, they'll seize everything. You've ruined us. You ruined yourselves," I said, pulling my arm away. "You let him do it. You chose the money over the truth about her pain." Ethan stood paralyzed, his shark smile gone, replaced by a look of profound, terrified loss. He hadn't just lost his money. He had lost the illusion of his own integrity. I walked off that stage and out of the Willard Hotel. I hadn't taken a single penny of the $43 million yet, but I had secured something far more valuable: public, undeniable justice for the only person who ever truly believed in me. The rage was gone, replaced by the quiet, heavy resolve of a son who had finally honored his mother's love. The chaos after the press conference was total. My father, the untouchable senator, was led away in handcuffs, his image, his career, his entire life built on lies, dissolving in front of the cameras. Graham and Ethan stood on that stage, utterly defeated, their $43 million legacy frozen and worthless. I had secured justice, but the fight wasn't over. It was time to build something real. My father's trial was swift and merciless. The recording of the acceleration protocol was the hammer. Dr. Elias Thorne, facing life in prison, flipped immediately, confirming the conspiracy and the medical fraud used to steal the foundation's capital. My father was convicted on all counts. He received life without parole. He never looked at me once during the entire trial. Even in defeat, he couldn't acknowledge the son he called unworthy. The $43 million was mine, the final, undeniable restitution my mother had planned. I could have taken it, bought back my workshop, retired to Italy, and never looked back. But the money wasn't the inheritance. The truth was, the capital was tainted. Purchased with my mother's life and the suffering of the communities the foundation was supposed to serve. I used the money to create the Eleanor Vance Health and Artisan Foundation. We dedicated a large portion to funding innovative, ethical neurological research. The exact kind of immunotherapy my father had denied Mom. The rest went into building a massive community center, housing the Eleanor Vance Artisan Scholarship and Community Recovery Center. This was a place where wounded veterans and at-risk youth could find healing and purpose through the meticulous, honest work of woodworking and craft. A place where the integrity of the material mattered more than the size of the bank account. The most shocking part of the aftermath wasn't my father's downfall. It was Graham, my older brother, the high-flying CEO. Lost everything. The houses, the accounts, the political leverage, all gone. A few months after the verdict, he showed up at my new foundation workshop in a cheap suit, his arrogance completely shattered. "Lachlan," he said, his voice flat. "I need a job. Any job. I'll clean floors. I'll do anything that isn't built on a lie." I looked at the man who had called me a carpenter and a failure. I saw a shell of the ruthless CEO. I hired him to manage our inventory, a deliberately simple, humbling job. He was terrible at first, trying to boss around the staff and move too fast. But slowly, something in him started to change. He started spending time in the workshop, watching the veterans find focus by turning a raw block of wood into something beautiful. He started learning that value isn't measured in yield, but in effort. He had to learn humility from the ground up, with his hands. For the first time, maybe ever, we were actually brothers, working side by side for a common, honest purpose. Ethan, he vanished. Last I heard, he tried trading on his name overseas until the Vance reputation caught up to him. He sent me one brief email. "Mom won. You were right about the value." I never replied, but I didn't delete the message. I stand here today, not as the failed son, but as the founder of a successful organization dedicated to healing. I still work my wood. I make custom instruments for musicians who value craft over flash. My father taught me that money and power are the only metrics of worth. My mother taught me that integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. She knew the boy who chose to build guitars instead of power structures would ultimately be the one to bring down his empire. The greatest inheritance isn't the $43 million my mother secretly protected. It's the courage to use that money to honor truth and kindness. I was the keeper of her final masterpiece, and the sound it makes is justice. If you've listened to this whole story, you know the truth. Your worth is not determined by the people who reject you. It's determined by the integrity you maintain when everything is screaming at you to compromise. My father left my brothers $43 million and called me worthless. I used that money to build a legacy of healing, not hatred. If this story resonated with the invisible battles you fought against toxicity and betrayal, if you believe that integrity eventually wins, I need you to act right now. First, hit that like button. Let me know this story matters. Second, comment below and tell me, what is the one thing your family told you wasn't worth fighting for, that turned out to be your greatest strength? Share your truth. And most importantly, hit subscribe. Don't just watch this one video and walk away. This channel is your community. When you subscribe, you join a movement of people who refuse to be defined by their trauma. You'll get more unfiltered, raw, true stories of underdog triumphs, complex family dynamics, and justice served. Subscribe right now so you don't miss the next chapter of how ordinary people build extraordinary lives from broken pieces. Thank you for listening to my story. Never stop fighting for the truth.